My daughter's husband called me crazy in front of our entire family. But when I showed his secret photos in court, everyone went silent. The judge's face turned pale, and my daughter collapsed in tears. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it has reached. I never thought I'd be sitting in a courtroom at 63 years old, fighting for my family's future. But there I was, clutching my old leather handbag with trembling fingers, watching my son-in-law James smirk as he told the judge I was mentally unstable. The courtroom was packed that day. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors, friends, and curious strangers drawn by the drama of our family falling apart. The air felt heavy, thick with tension and the faint smell of furniture polish. James sat confidently at the plaintiff's table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his hair neatly combed. Next to him, his lawyer shuffled papers importantly. They looked like they had already won. My daughter Melissa sat on the other side, her shoulders hunched, her once vibrant face now pale and drawn. She wouldn't look at me. She hadn't really looked at me in months, not since James convinced her I was trying to ruin their marriage. Your Honor, James's lawyer began, his voice smooth as oil. Mrs. Eleanor Wilson has been interfering in my client's marriage for years. She refuses to accept that her daughter has moved on with her life and created her own family. Her behavior has become increasingly erratic, and we have reason to believe she is experiencing cognitive decline. I felt my heart pound against my ribs. Cognitive decline. They were trying to paint me as senile, confused, a burden rather than a mother trying to protect her child. But I wasn't always just a mother. Before retirement, I was a nurse for 40 years at Chicago Memorial. I had seen people at their most vulnerable, had learned to spot lies and manipulation, and James Carter was the most manipulative person I had ever met. 5 years ago, when Melissa first brought James home, I was thrilled. My daughter was glowing with happiness, her hand intertwined with his, her eyes sparkling when she looked at him. James was charming, attentive, and seemed to adore my daughter. "Mom, this is James," Melissa had said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "The one I've been telling you about." James stepped forward, took my hand in both of his, and smiled warmly. "Mrs. Wilson, it's an honor to finally meet you. Melissa talks about you constantly." That night, as we sat around the dining table in the home my late husband Richard had left us, James entertained us with stories of his work as a financial advisor, his plans for the future, his dreams of starting a family with Melissa. "I want to give her everything she deserves," he said, looking at my daughter with what seemed like genuine love. I remember thinking how lucky Melissa was to have found someone who valued her so much. After losing Richard to cancer 15 years earlier, I had raised Melissa alone, working double shifts at the hospital to provide for her. Seeing her happy, secure, loved, it was everything I had hoped for. Their wedding was small but beautiful. Melissa wore my restored wedding dress, and as I watched them exchange vows in the garden of our family home, I felt Richard's presence, his approval. Our daughter was going to be okay. For the first 3 years, everything seemed perfect. They bought a small house across town. James's career appeared to flourish, and they blessed me with a granddaughter, little Emma, with her mother's eyes and her father's smile. I still remember the day I first held Emma in my arms at the hospital. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I made her the same silent promise I had made Melissa when she was born. I would always protect her, no matter what. But the cracks in their perfect life began to show shortly after Emma's 3rd birthday. It started with small things. James began criticizing Melissa, her cooking, her appearance, the way she parented Emma. At first, it was subtle, disguised as helpful suggestions. "Honey, maybe you should change before my colleagues arrive," he'd say. Or, Emma's getting a bit wild. Don't you think you should discipline her more? I noticed the changes in my daughter during our weekly Sunday dinners. Her laughter became less frequent, her voice quieter. She would check her phone constantly, texting James her whereabouts, asking permission for the simplest things. Is everything okay between you two? I asked one afternoon while James was in the other room playing with Emma. Melissa's smile was too quick, too bright. Of course, Mom. James is just under a lot of pressure at work. The financial market is tough right now. I nodded, not wanting to push, but something felt wrong. The daughter who had once been so independent, so full of life, was fading before my eyes. Then came the day James lost his job. Melissa called me in tears, her voice barely audible. Mom, James was let go. Budget cuts, they said. He's devastated. I tried to be supportive, offering to help financially, until James found another position. But when I mentioned this to him, his face darkened. We don't need your charity, Eleanor, he snapped, using my first name as he always did when annoyed. I'll take care of my family. But he didn't find another job. Weeks turned into months, and James's mood grew darker. He began staying out late, coming home smelling of alcohol and expensive perfume that wasn't Melissa's. When I tried to talk to Melissa about it, she defended him fiercely. He's networking, Mom, looking for opportunities. You don't understand how the business world works. Then came the request that changed everything. We need to sell the house, James announced during Sunday dinner, 6 months after losing his job. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Which house? James looked at me as if I were being deliberately obtuse. This house, Eleanor. Your house? It's too big for just one person, and the market is excellent right now. We could use the money to invest in a business opportunity I found. The house my Richard had worked his entire life to pay off. The house where Melissa had grown up, where Emma now played in the same garden her mother once had. The house that was meant to be Melissa's inheritance, her security. This house isn't for sale, I said quietly. Richard wanted it to stay in the family, for Melissa and Emma. James's smile didn't reach his eyes. With all due respect, Richard isn't here anymore. We need to think about the future, not cling to the past. That night, after they left, I couldn't sleep. Something about James's business opportunity felt wrong. The next morning, I called my old friend Robert, who had worked in banking for 40 years. Can you look into something for me, Robert? A company called Phoenix Ventures. James wants to invest our family's money in it. Robert called back 3 days later, his voice grave. Eleanor, stay away from this. Phoenix Ventures is a shell company with no real assets or operations. It's registered to a William Reed in the Cayman Islands. This has all the markings of a scam. William Reed. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I tried to warn Melissa, showing her what Robert had found, but James had already prepared her for this. See what I mean? He said, his arm around my daughter's shoulders. Your mother is trying to sabotage our future because she can't let go. She's always been controlling, Melissa. You know that. Melissa looked at me, doubt clouding her eyes. Mom, please stop interfering. James knows what he's doing, but I couldn't stop. Not when everything my husband had worked for, everything I had saved for our daughter, was at risk. I began investigating more deeply, using contacts from my years at the hospital to help me. What I discovered shook me to my core. James hadn't been laid off. He had been fired for embezzling client funds. The networking he claimed to be doing at night was actually meetings with a woman named Sophia Reed, William Reed's daughter. They had been planning this for months. Convince Melissa to sell our family home, funnel the money into their fake company, and disappear together. I gathered evidence meticulously. Bank statements showing unusual transfers, photos of James and Sophia together, taken by a private investigator, copies of the fraudulent company documents. I kept everything in a locked box in my bedroom closet. When I finally confronted James with what I knew, he laughed in my face. "You think anyone will believe you?" he said, his voice cold. "You're just a bitter old woman who can't accept that her daughter has a life of her own. If you try to tell Melissa any of this, I'll make sure she never speaks to you again." I knew he wasn't bluffing. He had already poisoned my relationship with Melissa, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state, my intentions. But I had to try. The next day, I invited Melissa for lunch, just the two of us. We sat at her favorite cafe, the one where we used to have mother-daughter dates when she was in high school. "Sweetheart," I began carefully, "I need to show you something important about James." Her face immediately hardened. "Mom, stop. I'm tired of this. James warned me you might try something like this. Please, just look," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photos of James and Sophia together, entering a hotel, holding hands in a restaurant, kissing in a car. Melissa's hands trembled as she flipped through the images. Her face paled, then flushed with anger, but not at James. "You had him followed?" she hissed. "Do you know how crazy that is? How invasive? These could be anyone. You probably hired someone to Photoshop these." "Melissa, please." "No." She cut me off, standing up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "James was right. You need help, Mom. Professional help. Until you get it, I don't think we should see each other." She left me sitting there, the untouched lunch growing cold between us. That night, James filed for a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing them, that I was a danger to their family. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and isolation. Melissa blocked my calls. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet of their home, which meant I couldn't see Emma either. My granddaughter, who had spent every weekend with me since she was born, now thought I had abandoned her. But then came a stroke of luck. My neighbor Martha saw James's car parked outside a motel on the edge of town, the same motel where, according to my private investigator, he met Sophia regularly. "There was a woman with him," Martha told me over our fence. "Young, blonde, definitely not Melissa." That same day, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Wilson," a woman's voice asked. "My name is Diane Reed. I believe you've been looking into my ex-husband William and my daughter Sophia." My heart raced. "Yes, I have." "We need to talk," she said. "They've done this before." We met at a small diner 2 towns over, where there was no chance of running into James or Melissa. Diane was elegant, composed, but I could see the same pain in her eyes that I felt in my heart. "William and Sophia have been running this scam for years," she explained, stirring her coffee absently. "They find vulnerable families with assets, insert themselves, and then disappear with everything they can get. They're not even father and daughter. They're lovers who use the family connection as cover when needed." She slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything is here: police reports from their previous victims, bank records, their real identities. I've been tracking them since they cleaned out my accounts 5 years ago. The police couldn't do anything because I had willingly transferred the money." I stared at the small device that might save my family. "Why are you helping me?" Diane's smile was sad. "Because someone should have helped me." Armed with this new evidence, I went to the police. Detective Harris listened patiently, reviewed the files, and nodded grimly. "This is serious, Mrs. Wilson. Multiple counts of fraud across state lines, but we need to move carefully. If they suspect we're onto them, they'll disappear." The plan was to gather more evidence, build a solid case before confronting James, but we ran out of time. 3 days later, Melissa called me, her voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "How could you, Mom? How could you file a police report against James? He told me everything. The police came to question him today." My blood ran cold. Someone at the station must have tipped him off. "Melissa, Listen to me. It's all true. James and Sophia. Stop it, she shouted. Just stop. James is filing for full custody of Emma. He says you're a danger to her with your delusions. And you know what? I agree with him. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but she had blocked my number again. That night, I drove to their house. Restraining order be damned. I needed to see my daughter to make her understand. But when I arrived, the house was dark. Their car was gone. Panicking, I called Detective Harris. They're running, I said. They must have taken Emma. Stay where you are, Mrs. Wilson, he ordered. We've put out an alert. They won't get far. But they did get far. All the way to the airport. Security footage later showed James, Melissa, and Emma heading toward the international terminal. If they had made it onto that plane to the Cayman Islands, I might never have seen my granddaughter again. By some miracle, a TSA agent recognized James from the alert. They were detained just before boarding. When the police searched James, they found fake passports for himself and Sophia, but not for Melissa or Emma. He had planned to abandon them once he had the money. The court case that followed was brutal. James's lawyer painted me as an obsessive, controlling mother who couldn't let go of her daughter. They claimed I had fabricated evidence, hired actors to pose as Diane Reed, created elaborate conspiracy theories because I couldn't accept Melissa's independence. And Melissa believed him. She sat beside him every day in court, holding his hand, glaring at me as if I were the criminal. Until the day I testified. I brought everything. The original evidence I had gathered, Diane Reed's files, and something else. A small album of family photos. Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Before I present the evidence against James Carter, I'd like to show the court something. I opened the album to a photo taken at my husband Richard's funeral. There, standing behind Melissa, was a younger James Carter. Not close enough to be noticeable, but clearly there, watching my grieving daughter. James didn't meet Melissa by chance 5 years ago, I explained. He targeted her. He was at my husband's funeral 15 years ago, scouting for vulnerable families with assets. The courtroom erupted in whispers. James's face drained of color. Then I showed the secret photos, not just of James and Sophia together, but of them with their previous victims. Photos of the real William Reed, who had died 10 years earlier. Bank statements showing how they had systematically drained their victims' accounts. And finally, emails between James and Sophia, planning their escape with my family's money, laughing about how easy it had been to turn Melissa against me. She actually thinks her mother is crazy, James had written. It's almost too easy. The judge called for order as the courtroom exploded. Melissa stared at the evidence, her face a mask of shock and dawning horror. James tried to flee. He actually stood up and ran for the door, but court officers tackled him before he could escape, and that's when everyone went silent. The judge's face turned pale as he reviewed the extent of the fraud. My daughter collapsed in tears as the full weight of James's betrayal hit her. It's been 6 months since that day in court. James is serving 15 years for fraud, identity theft, and attempted kidnapping. Sophia was arrested trying to cross the Canadian border. Melissa and Emma moved back in with me. Our relationship is healing slowly. Some nights, I still hear my daughter crying in her old bedroom, mourning the life she thought she had, the love she believed was real. Emma asks about her daddy sometimes. We tell her he had to go away for a while. Someday, when she's older, we'll have to tell her the truth. As for me, I don't regret anything I did to protect my family. Not the restraining order violation, not the sleepless nights spent gathering evidence, not the money spent on private investigators, because that's what mothers do. We protect our children, even when they don't want our protection, even when they hate us for it. If you're watching this and something feels wrong in your family, trust your instincts. Don't let anyone convince you that you're crazy for asking questions, for demanding answers. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones we should trust the least. And remember, no matter how convincing the mask, eventually it slips. The truth always finds its way to the light. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you in any way, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it.